Okay, go.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming to the property tax breakdown presentation. I want to introduce our finance director, Will Van Rossum. He'll be going through the property taxes. Go ahead, Will.
Thank you. So when James, Brendan, and Ashley reached out, they thought it'd be a good idea to break down the tax bill. So this thing hit the mailboxes today. I think a lot of us saw ours. But when we get it, it's a mystery maybe to some of how that number on the bottom of the bill was formulated. So as we got into conversation of putting on something like we are tonight, we took it even a step further in. There's a lot that goes into this whole thing. And I want to help explain and maybe answer some questions of how this all derives into a tax bill that you guys get in the mailbox this time of year, forever of when you guys own a property. So tonight we're going to cover what's in that tax bill, how it's generated, understanding it, property valuations. We also have a way to look up historical tax bills. So whether you know it or not, you guys can go back. I've seen some all the way back to 15 years on a parcel that you can go back and look up property tax bills. We also have Pay Online, and the latest thing that we had this year is in that flyer that the mayor had given out in diving into a tax bill like yours specifically. What are you actually paying for, and what is that going to? Which is very intuitive and I think transparent in where your dollar is actually going. So the tax bill is made up of a bunch of different jurisdictions. So if you see up on the screen right now, you got the county, you got the city, you got the school district, and you got the tech. There's actually a fifth one there that does not tax, and that's the Hardin Valley Metro Sewage District. The reason they don't tax is because they charge back through the fee that you guys get every time you send water down the drain. So in here you look at, well, why doesn't the county send out their tax bill, the city send out their tax bill, the tech, and so on and so forth. And back way before all of our time probably is the decision that it would be more streamlined to have one tax bill. So the misconception is when a tax bill is sent out, these handy dandy things, it's perceived to be the city's taxing me and what are they doing with all that money. But believe it or not, there's actually 4 different jurisdictions on the tax bill that break out into their different levy, and I'll get into that as we get into this. So the reason it's put on the city to collect it is to help streamline the process, not only for the jurisdiction, but even for the property owners that have tax bills that they would have to pay. Rather than paying 4, they can just pay 1 jurisdiction, and then we give that money back to the ones that actually put the taxes on. So where it all starts, every year around the August time frame, we get into a cycle called budget process. And that budget process is taking all the departments, coming together and figuring out what's the needs for the next year. And those needs obviously have a cost to it, and that cost generates what we have in our operating budget. Now, the operating budget is not just this made up, hey, let's charge anything. There is some rules and regulations behind that. So the Department of Revenue puts some regulations on the city and the staff and the alders and the mayor in that there's a levy limit that you can only go up by so much on. And once you're to that limit, you have to live within that limit. To further incentivize every community, this isn't just Kaukauna, it's throughout the state, there's this thing called expenditure restraint incentive. And what that is saying is that if you guys stay within a reasonable amount of increase for your expenses, we'll also give you more state aid. This year, for example, we have $415,000 coming from the state because we kept within a expenditure limit that wasn't astronomical. And the reason they do that, one, there's regulations on the local municipalities to keep everybody in check so the property taxpayers aren't just getting overtaxed on something that they really have no control over. Property tax levy. So once we're all done with our budget, we come up with a levy. The levy is no more than us saying we have different streams of revenue. User fees is the biggest one. Whatever cannot be made up comes in through the tax levy. That's what is generating these tax bills. These tax bills have a levy amount that we'll get into as we get into the slides, but the levy is really what generates the tax bills. It's not really the values of the home, assessed value, we'll get into a little bit, but the real driver in all of your tax bill is the tax levy. And that tax levy is what makes up the budget, makes it whole, and that's the one way that cities like Kaukauna, villages, and towns have as a revenue stream. Mill rate. There's a lot on here, I won't go through all of it, but mill rate is a good comparison if you guys are looking to say, how do I compare against the neighboring communities? Funny side note is, some people thought mill rate meant the only mill what their rate is, and it has nothing to do with Illinois. It's actually a equation that says for every $1,000 of value, your mill rate will charge you for your tax bill. So it's a good way to say this community might be different in size and value than the next one, but where you can compare is the mill rate. The other story I often hear is, well, their tax rate's too high over there, I'm moving to a different city or a village, and they stay within the Outagamie County. The only thing they really changed was the town mill rate. So mill rate is all the way down to the 4 districts that I listed at the beginning. But if somebody really wants to go move, they would have to change their overall mill rate, they would have to move out of the county, because the county's mill rate, the school district's mill rate is all gonna be the same no matter which jurisdiction you go to from the citywide. But it gives everybody a comparison of from one municipality to the other. So when you hear mill rate, it has nothing to do with our mill in town here. So tax rate calculations. Now, the mill rate does set that. So the tax rate is based on our overall value, and it has our property value that's divided by our levy. So our levy is now coming into the picture with the value of our properties, and that's divided out into an equation that we get our mill rate that then you as property owners say, okay, my value, my slice of the pie is this based on my value. That mill rate's applied, and that's where your tax bill is generated from. So property values is a topic that maybe has some misconception as well. There's 3 different ones I want to go over here. There's equalized, there's assessed, and there's appraised. Why does it matter? What does it really mean to you as a property owner? And how do you really know what one is determining what you guys pay? So let's just go through these one at a time here. The equalized is set by Department of Revenue, and this year this has been a challenge for us because, as we know, the market has been going, I would say, bonkers in the sense of going up. Well, when that goes up, it messes with our assessed value because that's locked in as of an assessment date, which is 2020. So the equalized value is a way for the county, the school district, and the tech to equally apples-to-apples comparison, say, okay, City of Kaukauna, you're in Outagamie next to Kimberly, next to Little Chute, next to Appleton, but this is your slice of the pie from our jurisdiction. Tech does the same thing, and school does the same thing. So the equalized value is really a way to split the overall arching jurisdiction's tax levy upon the different smaller communities like Kaukauna. This is also a pretty good indication of the estimated market value. That's why when the market prices go up, then you are saying, well, the value in that community is X number of dollars based on the recent market. And we know in the last few years that has been going pretty much straight up. The other value is the assessed value. This is one that you really should tune into on your taxes, or your tax bill, as well as just understanding what that is. So this is the value that our assessor comes around and says, okay, we're going to assess this property, and this is what it's worth compared to what other in the market are and what the current data is. We did a reval, and I'll get into that in a minute, back in 2020. So the assessor went around and said, okay, this property is this much compared to our comparables at this time. This one is worth this comparables at this time, and so on and so forth. That's locked in. By state statute, you cannot just say, I'm going to take Brian's house, I'm going to make it $100,000 more because I want to. There's rules and regulations by the Department of Revenue that it's either all citywide or it's at that same table rate that we have set since 2020. It can't even be by a neighborhood. It's got to be citywide or it's just based on that table. So the assessed value is really a way to say your piece of that pie, your percentage is X number of dollars based off of information that's based on all the other properties. They're all using the same deck of cards, if you will. Appraisal value. I hear this often too. Oh, my house appraised for X dollars. That has nothing to do with the taxes, nothing to do with the assessed rate. They maybe tie into it when you come selling it and you do a reval, but in a nutshell, the appraisal value is really for the home buyer and the home seller. They want to know what they're actually buying, what's fair market. So the appraised value has nothing to do with your tax bill or doesn't even play a factor in how that tax bill is generated. I just really want to touch quick on this property reval because the misconception of this one is it's going to make my property taxes go up. In some cases, yes, and some illustrations that I'll show in a minute. In many cases, it's not the case. So, as I mentioned before, the last time we did a reval was 2020. Before that was 2009. In my opinion, that gap was way too long. So we have, I guess, thoughts that have every 5 to 7 years or whenever we get out of whack. So revaluation is really just reset the playing field, make sure that our overall tax value and our tax liability is equitable among property owners, and some that haven't done anything aren't paying more than their fair share based on an old data set of values within the table. So reval, some people think it's because it's going to increase my taxes, and that's not always the case, and I'll demonstrate that in a minute here. The reason we have to do a reval, outside of just making it equitable for our property owners, but the DOR actually puts a mandate in. So anytime we get out of whack by plus or minus 10%, for example, right now we're at 82%. So what that means is that our assessed values are at 82% of full value. We're under because the values of the market is going way up. We're out of compliance now as of last year. For example, we were at 94%, so we were within compliance because it's 90 or 110. Now we have 5 years to get back in compliance. That can happen in one of two ways. We do a reval, and that sets everything back to 1 and values change. The other thing is letting the market kind of correct itself, in that if values all of a sudden come down, that 82% would come up and make that more equal. I'm not an expert, and I don't pretend to be, nor do I have a crystal ball, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. So a reval is probably going to have to happen in the next 3 to 4 years. Essentially, what we're trying to do is 1, get back in compliance with this, and 2, make it equitable across all property owners. So this is the one illustration I'll show, but one misconception again is that a reval is going to increase my value, therefore I'm going to pay more tax. But if you look at this equation, the levy is what really drives, if you go back to that slide that I have, the levy is what really drives your tax bill. And if the levy, in all intents and purposes, stays the same, if the market value or the assessed value goes up on your property, by default the tax rate's going to go down. So if the tax rate goes down, your value goes up, it's going to reset that playing field, and more than likely, if you're one that was on the old table, your taxes will go down on it. Now, there is the other side of the coin where if somebody is coming in late and having a lower value, their taxes will go up, but then that's saying that they're paying what they should be paying, rather than paying less and somebody else, in a sense, subsidizing it. And I kind of touched that already. It really doesn't based on when you built your property, if you did improvements on it. What I tell a lot of folks is that if you do not do any improvements to your house and you were on that current tax table that's used for the assessment, your tax bill isn't going to be increased based on that reval alone. Here's another illustration too. So before reval, it looks like this. We have 3 houses, they all look alike. We can agree they all look alike, right? The property taxes for this house is $285, the middle one is $360, the end one is $255. And you might be thinking, well, why is that? Well, the reason being is the tax table was set, let's say the house in the middle was the first one to get built. And it got taxed at that tax rate. Well, then the market went higher, then this house was built, market went even higher, the end one was built. Because of that ratio is off, and the tax table that we're using for all 3 of them have to be the same based on the law, these guys aren't paying their fair share. Middle one's paying more. Now when we do a reval, what it does is it resets. Now everybody, exact same houses yet, right? But they're all paying their fair share because we reset the values and tax rate comes down for 1. So yes, these guys should have been concerned that their tax bill was going to go up because they weren't being assessed at the right rate at the time. But the state law allows us to have that table. We have to live by that until we reval everyone, not just the individual houses. So tax bills. A lot of people, when they get them, probably not going to be, it's like Christmas cards, ripping them open, looking at that bottom line, $6,080. This is just an example. It's all public record if you want. I'll show you how to get to that. But a lot of people go to that bottom line, and I want to encourage folks to dive into it deeper to understand it. Again, the misconception is this whole tax bill does not come to the city. Believe it or not, we get questions on why school district, why tech, why county, and we really have no information because that's not our budget or levy that we set forth on. So if you look at this on the left-hand side here, we have those 5 jurisdictions that I mentioned: county, local, tech, and school district, and then that valley metro is that heart of the valley. And you can see that's 0. The red circle is the actual taxes this year. And then if you look at the levy, so the first 2 columns are going to give us our levy amount. This year it's at $26.7 million for our city. That's all rolled up in all 4 jurisdictions. So if you look at that, there's also underneath that some credits. And the reason I chose this one is because, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but the first dollar credit is automatically given to everyone that has an improvement on their property. However, the lottery gaming, there's some stipulations as to how you will qualify for that, but if you do not see that on your tax bill, and the qualifications we'll get to in a minute, you do qualify, you're gonna have to apply, which come to the city, the clerk can give you the form to fill out. But at the end of all that, we have a net property tax of $48.99 for this specific property. That's typically, in a perfect world, it's net property tax up there, the bottom line, they all match. One other thing that could be on a tax bill is in that blue circle up there. That blue circle has special assessments. So in this case, this is on Wayne. They did have a street improvement and they had sidewalk put in. So that property owner chose not to pay that off and instead have a tenth of that for the next 10 years go onto their tax bill. So after the 10th payment, that will fall off and then they'll end up seeing the net be the same in all 3 spots. The other thing I want to point out is the school tax credit that's coming from the state, that is listed over here, so that is actually rolled out. So if you look at the overall, this is baked into that, but they just call that out separately. And then we talked about this thing called mill rate. This is that mill rate, and if you took that 0.02025 and multiplied by your assessed value, that would give you your overall tax bill. Which leads me to my next point. Up on the left-hand side of your tax bill is your assessed value. So if you want to know what your assessed value is, that's this right here. And then the equalize, if you will, or fair market is listed on the right-hand side. So this is that ratio I was mentioning in the very beginning that right now we're sitting at 82, just based on the market. That's because the right side is outpacing where those tables are set. So when you want to see what the estimated market value or equalize, that's the left-hand side, but the mill rate, this number times that, is going to get you your overall tax bill. So when somebody says mill rate, in a nutshell, you want this mill rate to be lower than your person you're competing with. So if somebody in the neighboring community saying my mill rate's lower than yours, go to your tax bill, look at that, and compare to what their number is.
So it's kind of a combination of both.
Exactly. So that's the comparison I was trying to.
One jurisdiction sets that.
Yes. So ours is specific to ours, but I can compare that number to neighboring communities to say, okay, how do we compare mill rate wise? That's apples to apples. Anything else value wise, because there's different businesses, different house values, that doesn't matter. That's the bottom line is the apples to apples comparison. So that first dollar credit, there's a lot of information here on how to calculate if you're interested. But again, if you have any kind of improvement house, typically is what is going to get you that. But if you have any kind of improvements on your property, a vacant lot's not going to get you that. But anything with some structure on it's going to get you that first dollar credit, which we showed on the tax bill right there. This year it's $55.21 for this property owner. The other tax or credit that you'll see on your tax bill is the lottery and gaming credit. Now this is the one, if you look at the screen here, there's some things that you have to qualify to get it. And if you don't see it on your tax bill, that's something that you're going to have to come into the city, or you can go on the website if you wanted to, but we can help you get that form submitted to get that credit. But essentially you have to be that first of all. So the last session we had people that had multiple properties. You can only get this once. That's your main residence, and you have to be there January 1. You also have to essentially live there all year and then apply for it. So essentially the lottery tickets that are sold and the winners pay their taxes, that goes into a fund. That's what funds this specific credit that we get on our tax bills. But again, if you don't see it and you think you qualify based on what we're showing on the screen, stop in and we can get you guys a form. Historical tax bill lookup. So all the tax bills, as I mentioned in the beginning, are housed on the county website. And that's the other thing that it's worth mentioning is that the tax bills, our biggest part as a municipality is giving our levy, collecting the tax bills, and then dishing out the money that is owed to the jurisdictions. The county actually houses all these tax bills. The county prints these tax bills. The county generates these tax bills. So the county has a big part in this, in that it's common across all the communities, and I'll get to that in a minute. But if you're ever interested, public information on any property in the Allegheny County can be viewed at this link right here. So to kind of give you a demo via screenshots, and I can dive into it live if you wanted to. When you come to the city's or the county's website, you can type in an address and essentially hit find. And when you get to the next screen, it'll give you that information of that owner, and then you click on that parcel number. And once you click on that parcel number, this is a county website that has this specific property, but as you can see, that drop-down menu has a wealth of information for you, from assessment, from taxes, from sale history, other documents. So I would encourage you guys to go out there and just snoop around and see what is out there. Again, it's all public knowledge. Anything that's not is not going to be out there. But in this case, if you're looking for your taxes, select the taxes on the menu. One thing I did learn, because I'm on the site quite often, once you select that, it'll hold that. So if you always want to see what your taxes are, select it once, and then next time you come back, it'll be there. Once you're into the taxes side of it, this is where the historic ones. So this specific property goes all the way back to 2010. I haven't seen it back further, but my hunch tells me, based on the numbers, we could probably have 20 years of tax history on their website, unless they switch programs on us. But if you were to click on any one of those years in red, that's a link, that's going to pop open that tax bill. All that tax bill that we looked at on that couple slides back will be visible for you. The other option is paying online. So this is all housed within the county website. There is ways to pay online. One thing it's worth mentioning too is the city takes the first installment. That's due by January 31st. After January 31st, we turn all the tax bills back over to the county, and then all the payments have to be made there. And why that's relevant is if you make the first installment at the city by January 31st, the second installment has to be made at the county by the July 31st date. The other thing worth mentioning, and I learned this probably 3 years into my career when I was helping somebody out at the city, is that there is a delinquent charge. So if you don't make that first installment by January 31st, and do the second installment, it's the 12% APR interest rate. So I would encourage you not to get in that predicament, because that can get expensive. So on the next slide, it kind of gives you a visual. Once you're inside here, again, it has a history of this tax bill. You can see this specific one. It just goes from the 2010 all the way up. But on the very bottom, that's where you hit pay taxes. This is another slide that basically says you can add a bunch of different parcels. There's a lady in your previous session, and she had 3 properties that she could pay all at the same time if that was a desire. Once you have them all in your cart, you hit pay. Now the city and the county are partnered with a third-party vendor that takes our payment processing. So even at the city, if you guys were to come in, or even if we are on the website, this MSD is what it's called, is the one that takes the payment. So you're going to end up leaving the website after you get your information in. And then the 3 options that we have online are your e-check, which is free, credit card is 2.2%, and then your debit card, if you want to use that, is 3.5%. So some of the benefits to that is you get instant confirmation. I can't tell you how many times we get people that mail the bill in today, and then they call tomorrow and they get it yet. So, well, no, it's got to work its way through the mail system, and then we receipt, and then we get in the mail that day. So you do get instant confirmation. You get a digital receipt, you get an email if you want as well. And also eliminates any steps, because the mail does have some steps internally that we have to take to get that tax bill receipted. So new this year is what we're calling a tax bill widget. And really what this does is it allows anyone to go on their specific bill, or anybody's bill for that matter, in the city of Kaukauna, and just understand where their dollars are going. Again, that misconception is this whole tax bill sits at the city, and it doesn't. But it actually takes it a step further and breaks it down by the different areas within the city. So this is housed, this is on that form that the mayor had sent out in the beginning, but just to go over where it's at. It is underneath departments, finance, and tax bill on the left-hand side. We also, I think for the probably month and a half or 2 months, maybe through February, we do have this on our front page. And I can show you that at the end here, but it's a button on the front page that makes it even easier. But once you get there, it allows you to start typing any property in there. So you can start typing a parcel number if you know it. You can start typing an address if you know it. it's going to filter through the list to say, okay, based on what you're telling me inside that search box where it's yellow, here are the addresses within the city of Tacoma. You find the address that you want, and you hit submit. That next screen is going to give you a first graph, which is breaking the bill into those four jurisdictions that we have. Like we have up here, we have the county, city, school, and tech. And then if you were to hover over those, it would give you the actual dollar amount and percent of the bill that it's actually making up, specific to this property. You can see up top where it has the address. In this case, we picked down 1523 Thielen, and it gives you the parcel number. So this graph is specific to this property. Underneath that, to take it a step further, is it gives a overview of what the county provides for their tax bill, what the city provides for their tax bill, school district, and the tech. So you have a little understanding of, okay, what does the county actually do for me with the bill that I'm paying to them. And furthermore, those credits that we mentioned, there's a little more explanation here as well as that slide. But this is all specific to that property yet. So you can see they got the first dollar credit of $51.11, their lottery credit, and their overall property tax in the bottom left-hand corner here is all specific to that one property that we typed in the beginning. Diving a little bit deeper, now if you go below this is the actual city now. So a lot of people are like, well, what am I paying the city? So if you were to dive into this, you can see the graph is going to break it out by police department, fire and rescue, DPW, administrative parks, and so on and so forth. Same concept. If you were to hover over this, in this case, it looks like the fire and rescue for this bill was 203.07 or 14% of their payment that they're making for the city. So this really gives you an idea of where your dollars are going that you're paying to the city in the services. A lot of these, some people look at it and say, well, I know I use this service and that service, but I don't use that service. Like we said in the last session, it's a community effort here in that you may not use this service, however, it betters our community, the community is safer, and therefore we're better together with that. But at least you have an understanding of what you're supporting in the community for the tax dollars that you're paying. And similar to that last table, we give a breakdown of all the different areas, from the police department all the way down to the administrative, the capital, the debt service, and all, so on and so forth. So this is just a snippet of the top four, but every one of these on the left-hand side has a description of what that actually is doing for you guys. So really, our desire for that widget was the thought of giving a high-level view, but then also being more transparent of where that tax bill is, because the budget is 200 some odd pages, if not more, that has all this information. That's where this all starts, and it ends up with this little thing. So it's crazy that almost 300 pages ends up in a little folded paper that people maybe have a sliver of an idea of how that was generated. The thought of this is at least to understand, okay, my number's here, now what is it actually supporting? And this is all going back to that August exercise that we do with the budget process and formulating what we need to operate as a city. So that's that URL. I know there's that QR code as well that the mayor had sent out on that paper. If there's no questions on that, I would like to demonstrate live on the website if you guys are interested. Okay, so if we come to the website, so let's just start with the tax bill breakdown. So you could click on this button right here that our communications coordinator put there. That's going to probably end up going away when the next big season comes around. So by the end of February, that's probably not going to be there. But if I clicked on this, it would take me to that tax bill breakdown. The other way, as I was describing, was up here in department. You go to finance, and on the left-hand side here, this will always remain. So this is going to remain on the website until next year's tax bill comes out, and we'll update that data to the new data that's making up the tax bills. So if I, again, click on my child results here, I can see as I type, it limits what's in the, because 1523 only has so many, if it doesn't apply, it limits the fields down. So if I just click on this, hit submit, gives a little bit of an overview. Contact us if you have any questions, but again, If I just hover over each one of these, it gives a percentage of the bill and the dollar amount of each jurisdiction. If I slide a little bit lower, here's that description, all in the table. And then if I slide even further, here is the table specific to the city that tells us what each service is taking from that tax dollar, percentage and the actual dollar amount. As I was mentioning earlier, the first four was the only ones that we captured, but you can see there's quite a few other ones that we give descriptions on below, and then you have the overall tax bill. So again, this is specific, the 1738 is specific to the property that's being searched on. So if you have curiosity, you can go search on any property within the city if it's not your own and see what each one is paying. Any questions on that widget, the tax breakdown widget tool? If not, the other part I would like to maybe just give a shout out to is the budgeting side. So a lot of people don't know this, but we have a budget presentation early November, and then we have the public hearing. That budget gets adopted, that's what kicks off the tax bill. So underneath finance, budgeting has the last, I think, 7 years of budget. So if you clicked on this, it would end up opening up the tax bill, or I'm sorry, the budget that makes up the tax bill. So if you're ever curious about departments, what makes up that tax bill in more detail than what that tax budget is giving you, the budget has a bunch of information that you might find helpful for that. Any questions on that? Okay. Well, if there's no questions, I can demonstrate if I pull up the property, or I can adjourn.
You were saying that, we were only at 82%, so we were out of compliance.
Correct.
And you said we would wait another 3 or 4 years to get back into compliance then, or?
We wouldn't wait. Next year is probably the year that we're gonna discuss it and then budget for that. So that reevaluation to get us back into compliance is around a price tag at least north of 150 to close to $200,000. So that's gonna take time. We're at the budget cycle. We have, seeing how this is the first year we're out, we have technically 5 years, but I won't wait until the last year to do it, because if we miss it, the Department of Revenue steps in and says, we're doing it, and we're sending you the bill, we don't care what it is. I'm sure they do that to some extent, but yes, we are out of compliance, but just because we're out of compliance doesn't mean they come and just padlock the city. They give us 5 years to do it.
Okay.
So now that we're out of compliance, we are gonna start that process of looking at the reval and getting that back into compliance. The trick of it is if we do that again like we did in 2020, 3 years later we're out of compliance, we spent the money back then, here we are again. But if we do it in a time where it then becomes more stable in the market and we're good for another 5 to 7 years, that would be the desire. But that's a timing thing that I don't think any of us have the knowledge behind yet, so.
Okay.
Yep, so we have to by law, and we will be looking at that. Any other questions? If not, I appreciate you guys taking the time to come out. I know tax season's not fun. It's a fun, we'll call it challenge to make all the difficult things work in a budget and make it palatable to the citizens, but it's somewhat stressful, but some people like it, some people just don't like it. It's in the middle, but know that it supports the community. If you guys dive into it further, you might have a better understanding of it. So thank you guys for coming.
Thanks, Will.
Yep, thank you.
they